All right, welcome to the call tonight. My name is Erica Hatfield. I'm with the Convention of States, Texas. I'm the state director. And Al's phone is ringing. The goal of the Convention of States is to propose amendments via Article 5 of the Constitution to impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit terms of office for its officials and members of Congress. Since Texas is a past state, our mission is to grow the largest grassroots army of self-governing citizens, because once amendments are proposed, those amendments have to come back to the states and be ratified. And for that, we need a large grassroots army of engaged citizenry. A big part of self-governance is to vet and interview candidates. So we encourage everyone to actually call any candidate, regardless of what level. Ensure that you're voting for someone who's going to represent you well. And so with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Al Torres to introduce our guest tonight. I
have the great honor of actually introducing the Colonel tonight. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, retired. Lieutenant Colonel is a Christian constitutional conservative, a combat veteran, and a former member of the United States Congress. In November of 2010, Alan was elected to the United States Congress representing Florida's 22nd district, and as a member of the 112th Congress, he sat on the Small Business and Armed Services Committees and was instrumental in the passage of the 2011 and 2012 National Defense Authorization Acts. He is the former executive director of the National Center of Policy Analysis in Dallas, Texas, and a former director of the Booker T. Washington Initiative for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. In July of 2020, Mr. West was elected chairman of the Republican Party of Texas by an overwhelming majority of state delegates. He is married to Dr. Angela Graham West, a financial advisor, and they have two daughters, Aubrey, a board-certified physician assistant, and Austin, a nursing assistant. I hope I pronounced that right. He is also the proud grandfather of grandson Jackson, an avid supporter of a Convention of States. Thank you for being with us here tonight, Colonel.
It's my pleasure, Al. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to open up with the very first question and take it hardball I'd like a hardball answer on it. Afghanistan. What do you say to those of us who put our boots on the ground in fighting against terrorism? And how do we make sense of what's happening today? The Convention of States in Texas has over 19,000 identified veterans with the Convention of States. What do you say to us today, sir?
Well, I say that you should hold your head proudly and hold your head high. I spent 2.5 years in Afghanistan myself, based out of Kandahar, working with the Afghan National Army between 2005 to the end of 2007. So I think when you go back and you read George Santayana, the Spanish political philosopher, he had a quote from 1928. He said, "Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." And so I recall my older brother who served in Vietnam, and what he had to go through. And if you look at in Vietnam, we never lost a battle on the ground. Truthfully, didn't, but we lost it strategically. We had bad decisions that was being made at the political level, traced back to Washington, D.C., and the exact same thing here. And as you saw with Barack Obama back in in his term as president, when he made the horrible unilateral decision to withdraw our footprint out of Iraq and created the vacuum and the void, and then we had ISIS. So the exact same thing here. But this is not a reflection of the honor, the integrity, the character, the service and the sacrifice and commitment of our men and women. You know, we have a saying in the military that all gave some, but some gave all. And so we should not have our heads down. But what we should realize is that we, as the guardians of the Republic, the men and women who serve in the uniform, we have to continue to serve even after we're not in uniform. And that's why I think it's important that we have men and women in elected positions that can make sure that we make the right decisions to protect our brothers and sisters that are still serving in uniform. My big concern about what we saw happen in Afghanistan is that it shows a lack of will and resolve. It shows that our allies have to be very concerned about whether or not we will come to their aid. Russia, China, Iran are probably licking their chops and bringing it home here to Texas when you have such an unsecured border like we have. And we know that the cartels, who are a terrorist organization in and of themselves, when they're working with other terrorists, such as Hezbollah and also with Iran, They're funneling people across this unsecure border. And I am real concerned about what could happen here in the state of Texas or further into the United States of America. But every single one of our brothers and sisters needs to hold their heads up. And I just recently had a conversation with my pastor who told me that he had someone that's a friend of his that served in Afghanistan, and he was considering taking his own life. And no veteran should take their own life because they're still honoring what we had done. And we must continue to stand up and fight.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody else want to jump in with another question before I throw some more out there?
Yeah, I would like to ask, what would you consider your most important accomplishment since you've been in Texas?
I think the most important accomplishment was to be the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, and knowing that the Democrats wanted to turn Texas blue. They wanted to flip the Texas State House. They wanted to take, I believe, 10 or 11 congressional seats, and they spent close to $50 million to do that, and they got no electoral successes whatsoever. And coming out of that, we were able to flip the Rio Grande Valley. We were able to take a county like Zapata County, and now all of a sudden, it's in 100 years, it's gone from Democrat to Republican. And then I also look at the successes that we had in our municipal level races, our school board races. And so I see an awakening of constitutional conservatives here in the great state of Texas.
One of our priorities is banning taxpayer-funded lobbying. And which lobbyist supports you and which one is most helpful to you?
I would say the Veterans Lobby. And I think that's a very important lobby to have behind me. Look, I know very well that the energy sector lobby, I don't think they're going to be really looking for someone that's going to hold them accountable. What happened in February this past year in Texas should not happen. Texas should never go dark and look like North Korea. And I don't think that any of the people down in Austin are looking for someone that's going to come down there and try to right-size the state government based upon constitutional conservative principles and values and hold legislators accountable, like you saw me do with the Speaker of the House, challenging him when he said he wanted to put Democrats in committee chair positions, or even challenging the governor when he unconstitutionally extended out the early voting period from 2 weeks to 3 weeks. That's a responsibility of the legislature, and he was in violation of the Texas state constitution. So I think that people are seeing that I will challenge anyone when it comes to the rule of law. And for me, the most important lobbying group, like I said, are veterans and the citizens here in the state of Texas.
Another question is, we have 14 counties that have censored Governor Abbott. How many would it take to have you step down if you were to become governor?
Well, I would not hope that any county or would ever want to have to censor me, because I'm going to be there to represent the people, and especially the legislative priorities of the Republican Party of Texas, which is the reason why I would get elected and I would govern thereof. And so hopefully no one is going to bring about a censure, because they know that I'm doing exactly what I said that I would do.
Great. Does anybody want to ask a question? Raise your hand, please.
Tim raised his hand.
I came in on the end. I'm not sure what it was about. Sorry.
That's okay. Put yourself on mute, Edna, and then if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. Tim?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess just talk to us about the border. How are you going to stop the travesty that's occurring on the border right now?
Well, sure. And I think one of the most important things we have to realize is that Texas is a sovereign state. And when you have a federal government that is unconstitutionally implementing an open borders policy, the Constitution grants us the ability and the right in Article 1, Section 10, Clause number 3 to protect ourselves and defend ourselves from what the founding fathers call an invasion when there's an imminent danger without any admitted delay. First thing, you got to put your National Guard down there. Full mobilization. We have 19 to 20,000 in the Texas National Guard, and that is a deterrent force. We got to make sure they have the right rules of engagement. We just had in the past, 13 days, 2 shootings coming out of Mexico with cartel members across the Rio Grande River into the state of Texas, targeting Border Patrol agents. That's an act of war, but yet you don't hear anyone talking about it, anyone do anything about it. So therefore, we need to also designate the cartels as transnational narco-criminal terrorist organizations. So therefore, we can go after their resourcing, we can go after their funding. There should not be stash houses. Who's the real estate agent that is selling houses to cartel members and things of that nature? The other thing that we have to do is these not-for-profit organizations like the Catholic Charities that is down there processing illegal immigrants. We revoke their license to operate here in the state of Texas. That's very simple. If you're a 501c3, you have to submit an application to get a license to operate in a respective state, and we can just revoke that if people want to aid and abet illegal immigration, which is against our Constitution. The other thing is that we have to find a way, and we have to pass this through the legislature, that we can empower our law enforcement agencies to be able to detain, to arrest, and to deport individuals out of the state of Texas, because the federal government is not doing. The Border Patrol has been told not to patrol, basically just to collect and process individuals, and ICE is being told not to deport any individuals. We, again, as a sovereign state, and that's why the Convention of States is so important, because you have the 10th Amendment. The power in a constitutional republic under the system of federalism is with the states, and we have to assert that. The other thing that I would do is start to tax the remittances of illegal immigrants. There's a huge transfer of wealth that is leaving the state of Texas, tens of billions of dollars going back to Mexico, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras. And I think, the state of Oklahoma taxes remittances of illegals at 1%. I think we should tax those remittances at the highest income bracket that we are asking law-abiding legal citizens here in the state of Texas to pay, and that's 37%. So those are some of the key things I think that need to be done to get control of our border.
Okay, a few follow-ups on that. So you're saying the state of Texas has the authority to designate, the cartel as transnational criminal organization, and from that point treat them as such, even though the federal government won't do it.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we are a sovereign state, and as the leader of this state, I do not want to see any terrorist organization operating. That's what the cartels are. They are terrorizing, they're threatening citizens here in the state of Texas. They are fired across the international border into the sovereign state of Texas. So we need to treat them as non-state, non-uniform belligerents on this battlefield. And like I said, the most important thing is we need to go after their finances, go after anyone that is aiding, abetting, and allowing them to, funnel money, to launder money. So that means that if you're a bank, then we go in, we find their assets, we freeze those assets, we seize those assets, and we put those assets into the coffers of the state of Texas. And those assets are targeted for border security and border security funding.
As the governor, do you need to go through the legislature to do any of this, or can you do it, per executive order like we hear so much at the federal level?
I think that designating a terrorist organization, just the same as I don't understand why President Trump did not do this for the cartels. You can designate them as a terrorist organization by way of executive order, just the same as we do with Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, whomever. We don't have to go through a legislative process to do that. But what we do need to go through the legislative process is to make sure that we codify into law the ability of our law enforcement to be able to detain, arrest, and deport individuals here out of the state of Texas.
So if you're elected governor, you're still going to have to wait for the legislature to codify those laws before we can do anything.
Well, the great thing is that if I'm elected governor, we immediately go into the next legislative session in 2023. So that's the 88th session. And so we can start getting these things done. And that will be part of the legislative priorities that I put out there from the governor, which means that they have to immediately start working on those things. And the great thing about the Texas State Constitution is that the priorities that the governor lays out, those priorities should have to be met by the Texas State Constitution. And I will simply tell the legislature that I'm not going to be signing or considering. I will table everything else until all of those legislative priorities are done, to include, look at what happened with election integrity this past legislative session. If the governor says that that's a priority, and it was the #1 priority of the Republican Party of Texas, then why is it that election integrity was not dealt with until the last 72 to 96 hours? And of course, we know that the Democrats picked up and walked away, because after the budget is passed and the budget was signed by the governor, then that is really the only constitutional thing that the legislature has to do. So it's about making sure that we prioritize these things and we get it done. But I also need the assistance of an organization like Convention of States at the grassroots level to make sure that we have a supporting cast that understands that we need to protect and secure our border, and they need to be on the agenda of the Republican Party of Texas and the agenda that I would seek to be passed.
All right, and one last follow-up. You mentioned, taxing. I assume these are illegal aliens that are in the state of Texas. If we're able to identify who they are, why would they still be here? Why would we tax them and not send them home?
Well, that's a great question, but I think still you have to start off with that deterrent to say that if you're going to try and to come here into the state of Texas until we can find out who you are and identify you, those remittances are going to be taxed. And so again, that's one of the ways that you look at this as a total system. And it also sends a message to countries that are accepting these remittances, which becomes a huge part of their gross domestic product, to say that we're not going to allow you to have this underground economy that's being siphoned out of Texas.
Okay. And then
Tim, we're going to move on to Mike Metcalf. He's had his hand raised. If there's some more time afterwards, then we can.
I was going to say, my software, I can't see how to raise my hand, so I'm just going to be doing this.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
All right, thanks. First off, thanks for coming, sir, and thanks for all your service. Did my time in Iraq and Kuwait, so appreciate your service as well. So my job with Convention of States here in Texas is I'm the legislative liaison. Once we get done with all the shenanigans that are happening, all these special sessions, my next priority is getting ready for the 2023 session. Top of that list is our sunset. Our resolution, which passed in 2017, has a sunset. It kicks in 8 years afterwards, which will be in 2025. So next session is our last full session to take care of it. So that is going to be job one. So as a potential new governor who we be working with to get that done, how would you use your position to help execute that priority?
I think once again, when you stand up and you give the state address and you lay out your priorities for the upcoming legislative session, that is one of those. Because again, I want to make sure that we understand that the states are really the power broker, and we have to honor the 10th Amendment, and we have to let people know that we want to make sure that we are not going to be railroaded by an intrusive and onerous federal government. So I will continue to make the Convention of States part of the agenda going forward. If I'm there as the governor of the state of Texas, and I think that I've traveled to other states and here in the United States of America to advocate for the Convention of States. So you will have an ally in me.
And I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. So Edna, you have your hand raised.
Thank you very much, Colonel, for coming on and talking with us. It's a pleasure. I've met you several times before and always enjoyed it. I have a couple questions. One is a suggestion I made to my legislator about maybe possibly coming up with an amendment to the Texas Constitution in order to make it so that legislators cannot leave the room until everything is voted on. Thank you. It's just ridiculous having people leave their jobs. And I would like to get your input on that. Also, what?
Well, let me answer that first, because I'm George and I was a paratrooper, so I ain't really that smart. But I'll tell you first and foremost is that I grew up in a culture in the military. If you had that first formation and you were not there at the first formation and you did not have an excuse for not being at that first formation, you were AWOL. You were away without leave. You were not at your appointed place of duty at the appointed time. And if you were AWOL for 30 days, then you're a deserter. And so my mentality is that as soon as those 3 private jets had landed in Washington, D.C., if it was Governor West sitting there, I would have called an immediate press conference as soon as we had wheels down up there. And I would have very basically said, we have 57 vacated seats in the Texas State House. Because as the governor of Texas, I have called for a special session, which is constitutional. And we have individuals that are not at the appointed place of duty, and they are obstructing the representative democracy that we have here in Texas and the legislative process. So obviously they do not want to be legislators here, and we will call for a special election. And I would make sure that their pay stopped, no per diem, that their staffs were no longer paid, and that their offices within the next 24 hours were cleared out. And that's the message that you have to send, so you don't allow these shenanigans to happen, because it's very Pavlovian. If you allow bad behavior to continue to perpetuate itself, you're just going to get more bad behavior. And even now, I mean, all this talk and chest bumping about arresting people, you've had many of those Democrats that have come back here to the state of Texas. They're sitting at home. They're not showing up at the Texas State Capitol, and nothing is being done. As a matter of fact, all of those Democrats that were giving committee chairmanship positions by the Speaker of the House, Dave Phelan, they still have those committee chairmanship positions. And so we're sending a horrible message to the Democrats, especially in a time when we have got to pass election integrity to protect the integrity of our electoral systems.
Yeah, I agree on that. The other thing, and I apologize if this has already been asked, I don't know. Two-part question. One is what you think about trying to finish the wall. And the other one is what your opinion is on some of the military actions that we may need to take to secure our border. So.
Well, the first thing is that Texas has a 1,254-mile border that it shares with a foreign nation that is really teetering on being a failed state, because when you look at the provinces across the Rio Grande River, they're mostly controlled by, like I said, the narco-criminal terrorist organization we call the Cartels. The Trump administration estimated to complete an entire wall would be $10 to $12 billion. That's why the governor's saying that he has allocated $250 million. That's quite ludicrous, actually. And to have a crowdfundme or GoFundMe scheme, that is absolutely insidious. And what the governor has been talking about is not completing the Trump wall. He's talking about a chain link fence. I've been down the border and I've seen it, and it's basically just rolled up. So only 145 miles of the Trump wall has been completed. And remember what I just said, 1,254 mile border. So what are you doing in the interim? That's why I say you have to have a full deployment of your National Guard. In the excuse me, in the United States military, what we call it is security in depth, which means that you have different types of systems, integrated systems. So you have aerial surveillance, you have ground electronic surveillance, you have people that are there, boots on the grounds on the known infiltration routes, so that you can interdict those infiltration routes. And that's what we have to have. We have to establish a border control zone that says we're going to have complete control in this zone. No one is going to be, processed and released out of this zone. You're going to be processed. You're going to, we're going to build whatever database, and then you're going to be returned back. And that's why that's a key thing that we have to get through our legislature, is that we have that ability. And again, as I said, when the federal government abdicates its constitutional duty and responsibility as laid out in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, then the states have the right by the Constitution in Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, to be able to defend itself against what the founding fathers call an invasion. And when you have 210,000 apprehensions last month, the month of July, apprehension does not mean that they're deported. Apprehension means that you got those individuals, but then you process them and they continue to go away. And also we had close to 38,000 that were what they call getaways, people that you saw scurry, get across the border, and you were not able to track, you were not able to apprehend. So we have serious issues here. And that's why, again, Convention of States is so important, because states have power under the Constitution and they need to be able to exert that power.
Thank you. So Rebecca, you're up next.
Yes, and I'll take my tape off so you can see me real quick, and then I'll put it back on because my background looks bad. Yeah, a question raised. You were talking about taxing the illegals that are coming over 37%. Yeah, I like the taxing idea, but one of the problems that I see is that a lot of illegals work in the black market with cash. And number two, we don't even know exactly how many illegals are here. I see them all the time. A lot of them don't even speak English. But they work under the radar for cash, and mostly in construction, lawn work, and stuff like that. So what would you do to try to find out exactly who they are?
Sure, you just model exactly what Oklahoma is doing. Like I said, they already tax them 1%, but you work with Western Union. We have a comptroller for one reason. And I'm sure the financial institutions, you can track these wires that are going back into these countries, and you can start looking at who is filling out the wire. And then also you put the pressure on these organizations like Western Union, or if you try to have a underground black market wiring of money, you find those organizations, and they have stiff financial penalties brought against them, maybe even criminal penalties brought against them. So again, this is about creating a deterrent. It's about letting people know that it's not going to be tolerated. And you have to stop having the magnets by which people want to come here and work illegally and try to hide and do things that undermine the sovereignty of the state of Texas. Just the same as we should not be providing taxpayer-funded welfare benefits to people that are here illegally, nor should we be providing in-state tuition for people that are here illegally. One of our themes is Texas first. And that's what we have to start doing. And I think that this is something that makes very good sense. It's already been enacted in the state of Oklahoma. And we just want to make sure that we do the exact same thing down south here in Texas.
Okay, one quick follow-up on the employers that actually hire these illegals. I don't know if it's still in effect, but at one time you had to go through something to prove that, they were here legally and.
Well, you have the E-Verify system.
Yes, that's what it was. And is that in effect now? And if it is, it's not being followed.
Yeah.
How would you implement that?
Well, you just go ahead and implement the E-Verify. I cannot answer if it's in effect now, but once upon a time, you were able to have people who came here and worked seasonally, not come across illegally, but there was a control mechanism for that. And that's something we could do when you talk about ranchers and other places that need labor. But I don't think that we just want to open up this welcome mat for people to come here and be a part of an underground economy. And the other thing that I think is very important we do, who would ever thought that we'd have a federal government that would pay people to stay at home and not work? And so we've got to take away that semblance of dependency and trust and benefits of the federal government so that we can get people out there that will work. And so folks don't have to try to be a part of an underground employment mechanism like you see happening.
Thank you, Rebecca. Lamar?
Thank you, Colonel West.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So hey, thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate it. As a fellow paratrooper, you have to follow me because my best PLF was toes, knees, and face. So maybe nobody understands that, but you and I. Anyway, I guess so. I have two questions in there, completely from one end of the spectrum to another. One is we're talking about border policies and illegal immigration, and I guess every time this comes up, my instant thought is the fight that happened between the Fed and Arizona. Arizona said, "Hey, you guys aren't enforcing the federal laws. We're going to do it," and they were crushed. I mean, the federal government basically came in and said, "We're the federal government. We enforce those laws if we decide to or not. And as a state, you don't have that right." So ultimately, that does come down to a 10th Amendment fight. And I guess my thought is this something that you would then at that point in time ask the Attorney General that we're going to sue and end up in the Supreme Court, which again, I think that did end up in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, the federal government has all the right in the world to enforce or not enforce immigration policies.
Well, I find that absolutely ludicrous. And I'm not Jan Brewer also. And the thing is that either we, are a country that is a sovereign nation, we believe in the rule of law, and those words that I just repeated in Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, Article 4, Section 4, what the Supreme Court is supposed to do is interpret the law. And if you have a federal government that has abdicated their constitutional duty by the Constitution, then what recourse does the state have? Are we supposed to just sit back and be overrun by people that don't see our border or see the border of the United States of America. We're just not a piece of land in between Mexico, Arizona, Oklahoma, and New Mexico and Louisiana. So I think that it is ground that we should stand upon, and it's ground that we should have a fight on. And I'm not going to stop doing it just because some legal process. I'm not a litigator. I'm a leader. And either we believe in the Constitution, either we believe that we live in a constitutional republic, or we don't. And furthermore, when you look at the supremacy clause in the Constitution, it says very simply that the federal government is supreme over the states if they are passing laws that are pursuant thereof to the Constitution. Executive orders are not pursuant thereof to the Constitution. And so when you have someone such as the Biden administration right now implementing an open borders agenda by executive order, not through the legislative process, but through an executive order, that's unconstitutional. And I'm happy to make that fight any day, but I'm not going to go to the federal government to beg for permission to protect the state of Texas. That's what weaklings do.
Well, I hear you. I agree. I'm curious to see, and I need to go back and look at what that Arizona fight ended up. But I remember basically there being, the federal government basically, or the Supreme Court telling Arizona to, sit down and color. Let's move on.
We all remember the picture. Jan Brewer pointed a finger at Barack Obama on the tarmac, and of course Eric Holder came down, like a freight train. But again, I think that this is a time when you stand up and say, we're not going to tolerate that. We're not going to accept that. And again, that comes back to why the founding fathers put Article 5 in the Constitution, because
absolutely
they knew there would come a time when the federal government will be no different from the British. And if you look at many of the grievances that Thomas Jefferson wrote about in the Declaration of Independence, we see a lot of those grievances today. And so that's why it's important for us to make a stand. And if any state is going to make a stand, it should be Texas.
Sure. So I was going to ask about school choice. I know that you're a proponent for that. And I'm a huge fan. I have a good idea as to why we've had a problem here with Texas with that. That goes back to the taxpayer funded lobbying.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is circular when you really kind of map it all out. Really, at the end of the day, a lot of the things that we as a grassroots movement have tried to address comes down to us fighting lobbyists that are paid to fight against us using our money. So the school choice thing to me is important, just because I'm watching what is coming out of these schools, and we have kids that are, I think Cheryl was talking about it, where she sat down and was asking, hey, you're teaching our kids to hate us. So that's one of those things. Would that be a part of your agenda? Is basically trying to get some of the, I don't want to, for a lack of better terms, patriotism back into the schools? And that's my last question. I'll leave it at that.
Well, sure. School choice is not just something I believe in. I'm a product of school choice. I was born and raised in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia. 1961, I was born in a blacks only hospital. I grew up in the same neighborhood that produced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My parents made the choice not to send me to the two public schools in our neighborhood. They sent me to a black private Catholic school, Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic School, which was right across the street from Ebenezer Baptist Church. So I believe in that, because the equality of opportunity that you have in the United States of America is not achievable unless you have a good quality education. And what I see happening right now, you saw Randy Weingarten, the head of the teachers union, say that they're going to fight parents who try to get in the way of them teaching critical race theory to their children K through 12. So I will tell you, as governor of Texas, we're not going to have any cultural Marxism being taught in our schools from K all the way up to 12. And we will restrict funding to any independent school district that seeks to do so. And then as well, I think that we need to start looking at some of these colleges and universities that are state funded. And if they're out there teaching this indoctrination, teaching and trying to raise the next generation of little socialists, we need to start cutting back on the funding. If there's a professor that's out there teaching toxic masculinity, what does that have to do with the economy of Texas? Being it the oil and gas industry, the healthcare industry, the banking industry, finance industry, whatever. And so that's the type of scrutiny that I want to have on our system of education.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lamar. Darren?
Thank you, Colonel West, for joining us again. Just wanted to kind of expand on a question and a point that you just made about executive orders. I think we've all lived through over the last year great infringements on our liberties as a result of executive orders, whether it comes to the border or whether it comes to all the things with COVID and everything else. So I would like for you just kind of give us maybe some ideas and some thoughts as to where you stand and how you would approach limiting that power, because I'm very much opposed. That should be, as you said, the legislative process, having one person making those decisions, whether that's determining who's a terrorist and who's not, or whether you're supposed to wear a mask or whether you're not, or whether I can shut down your business and take away your property. That shouldn't be in one person's hands regardless. So maybe as an example, how would you have done things differently over the last year in the state of Texas to protect and uphold the Constitution that we have?
It's very simple. No elected official has the enumerated power to decide who or what is essential in the state of Texas or anywhere in the United States of America. The most essential thing in the state of Texas or anywhere in America is your liberty. And I would not have been going out and making decisions about which business had to close and which business could be opened up. What I'm supposed to do is provide you the best possible information so that you can make the best decision for you, yourself, your family, and your business. And so when I look at what happened in the past year, when you're going out and mandating masks and you're shutting down businesses, you're establishing a very bad precedent. And furthermore, you're acting outside of the scope of the Texas State Constitution, which says after 30 days, even if it's an emergency, you're supposed to bring the legislature back. And that's not what Governor Abbott did. Governor Abbott extended the early voting timeline from 2 weeks to 3 weeks unilaterally. And he also went out there and appropriated money to a corporation, MTX, I think about $290 million for them to do contact tracing. The only people who are supposed to appropriate monies is the legislative branch. That's in the Constitution. That's their duty and responsibility. So I'm not going to be a constitutional monarch, but when you talk about, executive orders are supposed to be done so that you can operate and function the executive branch. It's not supposed to be a means by which you try to rule over a state. And so when you talk about me designating the cartels as a terrorist organization, I see that's something that is within the purview of an executive to do that. That has nothing on the infringement of the rights, freedoms, and liberties of law-abiding legal citizens of the state of Texas. And like I said, I don't understand why we have not done that to this point, being in not just the state of Texas, but being the federal government. You look at MS-13. I think MS-13 is a terrorist organization. And I don't want to see MS-13 run around here. And that gives you an additional power to be able to go after these organizations. So I'm not going to look to rule over the state of Texas. I want to govern the state of Texas, but I also want to make sure that I'm protecting your safety and security.
So just one kind of follow up to that. I totally agree with everything that you just said. I am a little bit uncomfortable with how that process might work, especially with designating groups that might be running afoul. I don't disagree with you that they are terrorist groups, but I do think we need to be careful as to how we protect that, because I don't want you or someone else that might sit in that governor's chair at some point in the future to be able to take a group that they completely disagree with and abuse that power in the same way. So
yeah, and see, that's an important point. That's an important point because I'm not sitting here saying that this is a group that I ideologically disagree with. Look, I ideologically disagree with Antifa, and I would love to be able to shut down Antifa. There are other things that we can do through a legislative process, but those are American citizens, and so I'm not going to designate American citizens as a terrorist organization. When you have non-state, non-uniform belligerents that are operating inside the boundaries of the state of Texas, and they are, targeting Americans, and they're doing things that violate our rule of law, then, based upon their actions, they are a terrorist organization. But no, I'm not going to go out there and start saying, like Black Lives Matter. I don't agree with Black Lives Matter, but I'm not going to designate them as a terrorist organization. There are many other ways that we can undermine Black Lives Matter, but putting them on some type of hit list, that's not what I want to do. That's what the left does. And I never want to go down the path of doing what the left does, which is to try to crush your ideological opposition. I want to beat them on the battlefield of ideals. But if we ever do get to the point where, as you saw in Florida, where there are penalties if you are destroying property, if you are destroying businesses. Now that's how you do it through a legislative process.
Thank you very much. I'll leave my rest of the time for others.
Thank you.
Thank you. So another one of our priorities was or is election integrity. On the texasattorneygeneral.gov website, we have 534 successfully prosecuted election fraud offenses against 155 individuals by the Office of the Attorney General since 2005. 510 is the number of pending offenses against 43 defendants currently pending prosecution. And we have 386 is the number of currently active election fraud investigations. So what is the answer to election integrity? Is it audit? Is it changing the entire system, going to paper ballots? What's your answer?
Well, I think that without a doubt, you need to have some type of audible trail that you can go back to. But the most important thing is that there has to be consequences. And there's never any consequence. You look at Chris Hollins down in Harris County, the things that Chris Hollins did in the November 2020 election cycle, he should have been prosecuted for violating Texas election law, but he was not. We got some issues up here in Dallas County that we know for sure. But the thing is that we never hold people accountable. And I think that's the problem with Republicans, is that we continue to bring a plastic spoon to a gunfight, and we allow the other side to get away with all of these things. And they only get better. And when you talk about voter fraud, I kind of know a little bit about voter fraud from my congressional reelection in 2012, when you had 108% showing up at a precinct, or you had other nefarious things. I mean, the supervisor of elections in one county, St. Lucie County, was found going into the building and removing ballots or bringing in ballots, things of this nature, but yet nothing was done to that person, Gertrude Walker. So I think the most important thing is to work with the Secretary of State's office and to work with the Attorney General to make sure that when we see these nefarious actions, there is swift and immediate justice that is brought against people.
Thank you. So Tim, you have another question?
Yeah, just touch on foreign countries buying land in Texas. So I've heard that the Chinese have bought some number of acres next to an Air Force base.
Laughlin Air Force Base down in Del Rio is about 1,400 acres. It's a Chinese billionaire who used to be a captain in the Chinese People's Liberation Army.
So that's happened, or they're trying to
No,
do
that
that?
has happened. No, that has happened.
So what do we do about that?
Well, they passed a bill in the legislature, the Texas Infrastructure Protection Act. But again, if you're not enforcing it, if you're not doing anything when you find someone that is very questionable, or even I live up here in Garland, Texas, and not too far away from where I'm sitting right now in my home in Plano and Richardson, you have two corporate headquarters of ZTE and Huawei. And both of those are telecommunications companies that are controlled and owned, pretty much are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And just the same as this billionaire who is now talking about putting wind turbines down there on this land that he has purchased very near to this very strategically important air base, Laughlin, where we do pilot training. We shouldn't be allowing this to happen. I mean, we should find these front companies. We should find the people that are kind of like, the straw buyers. That's what really is happening here, allowing people to come in under other guises and through other shell organizations and entities and purchase land here in Texas. China is our #1 geopolitical foe. And there is no reason why in the state of Texas, we should allow anyone that formerly served in the People's Liberation Army of China, who has ties to the Chinese Communist Party, to be purchasing land that is strategically located near one of our air bases down in Laughlin. And then also having telecommunications firms that are being established up here. Richardson is one of the growing tech hubs outside of Austin, Texas. That should not be happening. So I would just enforce the law that was passed, the Texas Infrastructure Protection Act, which was put together and crafted by State Senator Donna Campbell.
Great, thank you. Edna, you have another question?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, I've read an article about that wind turbine that they're wanting to put up on that Chinese landowner's property that's supposed to be pretty tall. Anyway,
100 feet.
yeah, they could look down into the Air Force Base with it and everything. But anyway, I was just going to bring up something that maybe Mike Denfendahl can elaborate on. But have you seen the bill that Senator Birdwell put together that was to help kind of give guidelines to the governor in case of pandemics, in case of
Oh, yeah, it was the executive overreach. It was the executive overreach bill that it didn't get passed.
I know.
It was stymied. It was stymied over in the House. We got problems in the Texas State House between Dustin Burrows, Dave Phelan, and several others over there that are really just the cronies and the hitmen for the governor. But that was a good bill that would have reined in the executive overreach and executive powers that we saw that the gentleman brought up about the governor last year during the COVID issue.
Yeah, it's a really good bill, and that's a very good senator. So
he and I served together in the Army.
Yeah, he's a good man. He's a good man. Okay, that was it for me on that.
So are we hitting all of your priorities, or have we missed any of your priorities? We'd like to hear yours if we've missed any.
Well, I mean, without a doubt, you have hit a lot of those. I find it very disconcerting that we are not doing what is necessary to protect our history here. And part of protecting our history means that we have to educate future generations on that history. So the critical race theory is very important. The fact that we should have monument protection and historical marker protection. We got to end the child gender modification. I mean, there should not be chemical and physical castration procedures and operations being done on our children here in the state of Texas. I think that's another one of them. And I think the property taxes, without a doubt, we've got to transition away from this current system. I think that we can look at a consumption-based tax system, which is the system of taxation that we had prior to the income tax being established in 1917. But also, if we can do the right things with the budget surpluses that we continue to say that we have, we should allocate the X percentage of those budget surpluses against the maintenance and operations fund of the independent school district, so we can start providing that tax release to the citizens here in the state of Texas. But it is absolutely appalling and abhorrent that the system of taxation here in Texas is based upon the principles of Karl Marx. Number one, it's a progressive tax. And number two, it advances the abolishment of private property rights and private property ownership. Texas never can own their home, and Texas has the 6th highest property taxes in the United States of America. So that's another one of the things that I want to make sure that we rectify.
Good, good. Talking about history, we do have Constitution Week coming up, September 17th.
Absolutely.
Do you have any advice for the grassroots on how to make it better?
Well, I think it's so important that every person, just the same as on Independence Day, I gave a little talk at my church and I read the entire Declaration of Independence because most people have never read the entire Declaration of Independence. So I think it's important that we sit down in our homes, in our churches, in our communities on September the 17th, Constitution Day, and we have a discussion about a constitution, get people to understand that mandates, edicts, orders, and decrees, that's not law. And so people got to start understanding when you go to the airport and you hear that speaker, announcement saying that the federal government has passed a law that you have to wear a mask. No, that was just someone that wrote something down on an executive order. So when we have an informed, educated electorate, we can have an activated electorate. And I see that constitutional conservatives are starting to get better informed and better educated. Who would have thought 2 years ago, you saw no one at school board meetings. And now look at what's happening in school board meetings. So I see that awakening occurring. So I would just say to the grassroots, continue to educate and inform and activate people, because we cannot go on this ideological battlefield without being fully armored.
So another awakening, I guess we could call it, is the filling of precinct chairs. It seems to be a lot of buzz about that. So
Yep.
can you explain a little bit about precinct chairs and the importance of precinct chairs?
Yeah, sure. And I know Edna just said many of us are running for school board. School board is the most important elected position in the country. And we need to have the precinct chairs out there. Just imagine if you were in the military and you had platoons, but the platoon didn't have a platoon leader. Or in the platoon, the squads didn't have a squad leader. And so it's so important that you have that lowest level of leadership that is there to make sure that people understand their task and purpose. And that's what a precinct chair is. That they're that squad leader, they're that platoon leader that are bringing people together and make sure that they are on board and that they are managing that precinct. They know who the people are in the precinct. They keep them engaged. They know who the people that are moving into the precinct, and they engage with them. So that's why we need folks that are out there on the ground. You know, folks used to laugh at when they call Barack Obama a community organizer. I want us to start organizing communities. That's the most important thing. That's how we fight back against the left.
Rebecca, you have another question?
Yes, ma'am. Colonel West, something that we haven't touched on yet. If you were elected governor, these big cities that are defunding the police, I always try to thank every service member and every policeman when I walk by. What could we do to hold them accountable, to get them to quit defunding our police, because they keep retiring and we need protection? I can protect myself with a gun.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's kind of my job, but it's really not my job.
Well, I will tell you that law enforcement, the thin blue line is near and dear to my heart. When my older brother came back from Vietnam and he recovered from his wounds that he received at Quezon, very first thing he wanted to be was an Atlanta police officer. And I was very proud when he graduated police academy and the first time he drove his squad car up our little street and parked it out house and came in. And so I'm going to stand with the law enforcement. I'm going to put the pressure on those city councils that are seeking to do that. And look at what has happened in Austin, Texas. They defunded the police there, far left city council. They defunded the police by $150 million, and they have seen an increase of violent crime from 63 to 66%, to the point where now they're talking about refunding the police. And you see that all across the United States of America, because when you monkey around with people's safety and security, you lose them. And so that's one of the things we want to continue to talk about, is that these people on the progressive socialist leftist side, when they want to take away your blanket of security, and you're right, you have the constitutional right to protect and defend yourself, but it's good to have those people that are out there on the streets making sure that the criminals are kept at bay. Now, the other thing we have to do along with that is we've got to make sure that these activist judges, these leftist judges, that they're held accountable. And if you did not see, I wrote a little piece, and it was a press release about 4 Harris County judges that are out there releasing violent criminals on personal reconnaissance felony bonds, 7, 8, 9, 20 times. And these people are going right back out and committing very violent crimes. And so we need to get rid of those judges. And the Texas State Constitution in Article 15 gives us the ability to impeach those judges, just the same as these district attorneys like we have up here in Dallas County that are going out there saying they're not going to prosecute anyone when they are committing a crime at or below a certain amount of money. Here is $750. So we're supposed to be protecting citizens. So you can use the power of the purse against these officers that are not out there doing what is right by the rule of law.
You were talking about judges. I'm in Guadalupe County between Austin and San Antonio.
Yep.
And we have all Republican judges right now. But our judges have authorized a Democrat magistrate who I was promised by the judge that would not run for office, because he has already let some people go without bond that I feel like should have had at least some kind of bond. So I am looking for people that want to be judges, and I am trying to fight that here in Guadalupe as well. And I want to thank you for your service.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Colonel,
you.
I just want to add something if I could here. Colonel, I've heard you speak several times, and I know you always go back to, I'm the paratrooper, and go slow and easy with me. But I got to tell you, my mind explodes when I listen to you talk and you quote the Constitution. You quote verse and chapter from the Bible. You come up with everything and you've got it on your head. I can't even retain half of what you tell me all the time. And I just want to say, that's impressive. Listen to you speak is just impressive. How do you do it?
Well, I mean, I just, every single morning after I go out and I do my morning PT and run and workout, I just ask the Lord to bless me with the strength and courage that he challenged for Joshua and the wisdom and discernment that Solomon asked for. And I just believe that leadership is about being a competent leader. And you can't know everything, but you should at least have a working knowledge and understanding of those things that are important to the people that you're called to lead. And plus I lead a real boring life. I mean, I don't do anything but sit around and read books and all that kind of stuff. So that's it for me. Until college football season, now I get really, really engaged. But that's what people are looking for. People are looking for those principled, constitutional, conservative leaders. You may not like what I say, and I always say this when I run into leftists. You may not like what I say, but you can never say that.
Thank you.
Gators. Whoever said go Gators, I hate you. Okay? Tennessee, and I absolutely despise those reptiles.
Thank you, sir.
You're about to have to deal with Texas and the SEC there.
I'm looking for my headphones.
Well, everybody wants to come into the men's conference of college football, and that's the SEC.
Okay. Everybody wants to play in Texas.
All right, so we're at the bottom of the half hour, and our time with the Colonel is at an end. And so we thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for your time and your fight and your wisdom. And a lot of our teams have meetings, and I'm sure that they are interested in inviting you to come to their meetings. Is there a minimum of folks that have to be at the meeting before you attend, or they average around 30 to 70 people when they have their meetings?
Well, the Bible says where 2 or 3 are gathered, I will be in their midst. So 2 or 3 is fine with me.
All right, sounds good. Well, you have a good evening.
Absolutely. And if you guys aren't doing anything tonight, I'm about to flip over, and in 30 minutes, I'll do a Facebook Live to talk about my thoughts, perspectives on Afghanistan. Like I said, I spent 2.5 years there. So thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.